Ooh, the content of this meeting is being sent to YouTube.
Loading, loading, loading. Okay, we are officially
The
live.
content of this meeting.
Can everyone still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
We're live?
Yes, we're live.
Okay. All right, welcome everyone to the Roundtable Mentor 2024-2025 debut writer panel. That was a mouthful. We're here. My name is Karis Rogerson. I am one of the Roundtable mentors and event coordinators, and so is Olivia. Olivia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Olivia. Yep, one of the mentors for Roundtable Mentor this year. Very excited to start the panel.
Yeah, so we've got 5 incredible 2025 debut authors and roundtable mentors with us today. And we're just going to dive in with some questions because we've got some amazing questions. They've got some awesome insights. And my very first, very important question, could each of you please tell us your name and a little bit about your debut? And I'm going to call on someone to start, and then you can pick the next person to go. So, Taylor, would you like to start?
Oh my God, it's always me. Hi, I'm Taylor. And oh my gosh, my name and a little bit about my debut. My debut is Hollow. It is coming out with Peachtree Teen on September 30th. It's a young adult cult horror. The first line of it has never changed. I'm very proud of this fact. I don't know why. And I really love it. So if you like autistic characters and non-binary love interests and scary puppets, it's your book. I'm going to vote for Keen to go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hien Wen, and my YA thriller debut comes out December of this year. It's called Twin Tides. I write in the space of Vietnamese mythology and speculative spooky stuff, and this is very much in line with it. Long-lost twins are investigating their mother's death in a small town that might be plagued by a vengeful ghost. And very excited to chat with you all today. I will ping pong it. Ping pong it. I can't say that word. I'm not going to say it. To CL.
Hello, I'm CL, and my debut, Pride or Die, came out 2 weeks ago. It's a YA comedy mystery. Thunder. There's no thunder in the book, but sorry, there's like a storm. There is basically an attempted murder, and the LGBTQ club at the school is accused of it and has to solve it. And next, how about Olivia?
Oh, I don't have a debut coming out.
Oh.
Yeah, just moderating. So
Thank you for being here.
Shalini.
Hi. Hi everyone. I'm Shalini. My debut fantasy romance came out in April, on April 1st, April Fools. And it's called This Monster of Mine. It's a murder mystery slash political romantasy about a girl who returns to the city she almost died in to seek out the man responsible and who ends up working for who she believes is her number one suspect and love interest. And yeah, a little bit about me in the book. And I used to be a former lawyer, so that kind of informed a lot of what goes on in this book. Oh God. I'm gonna pick Deandra.
Oh, hi. I just got back. What did I
Yeah,
miss? The
I was just
question.
like, I hope you got back.
You're just doing introductions. If you want to say your name and also a little bit about your debut.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I am Deandra Davis. My debut is All the Noise at Once, which follows an autistic Black teen as he is trying to figure out what happens the night that his brother was wrongfully arrested. I don't know. Am I supposed to say anything else? My brain is not working.
You're good. Well, yeah, thank you all for introducing yourselves. I think we'll just jump into the next question. So feel free to, we didn't really have a set number of people we wanted to answer each question. So if you feel moved to answer, just go ahead. But the first question was just, what was your journey from getting agented to going on submission to then getting a book deal? Were there any road bumps along the way or anything that you think would be helpful to represent as part of that journey?
I'm on my third agent. And my first book died on submission. So with my second agent. So my first agent left the business 6 months after we signed. And my book was on submission, so I had to go through like the process of pulling it from submission. And then I waited 3 months because that was the term in the agency contract, because another agent was considering my work at the same agency, and then that agent passed, and I ended up signing with another agent who sold my debut after my first book died on submission after about like a year and a half. And then we kind of just like amicably decided that we weren't for each other. And I signed with my current agent, who I love, Victoria Marini. And she is wonderful. We've been on submission. We are now no longer on submission, but I'm not allowed to say why yet. So I will just say, like, getting your first agent is really exciting, but it's often not the end of the journey. Things can change, and that's okay. And sometimes your first book doesn't sell, and that's also okay. I think we hear a lot about these like amazing unicorn stories, like, oh, my first agent sold my first book that I ever wrote, and it was like a 6-figure deal, and here I am. But my experience wasn't that, and that's okay.
I think I'm so glad that you like just brought up the fact that like a lot of times you are going to switch agents even when it seems like it's a unicorn situation. So like I feel like I was in what a lot of people called a unicorn type situation, in that it was my first book. I only queried for about 4 months. Signed with my agent. I had multiple agent offers, which was great, signed with my agent. We did one big revision. We went on sub, we sold the book in 2 weeks. And like the first, like literally like a lot of people are like, what was it like on sub? Did you languish on sub? I was like, literally the first person that we heard back from was the offer. Like that was, I did not have to deal with a lot, right? Obviously rejections came after, right? But like our first notification was of the offer. It was the person that I ended up picking, because we did end up getting multiple offers, but it was like the first offer was the person that I ended up picking, who is Julia McCarthy, and genuinely like the most amazing editor in the entire world. I adore her. And I hope that she never leaves me. But but I mean, even when everything seems to align and you would think like, wow, all of that is amazing, you must still be with your agents. I am not. Right? I am not with my agent. And so I am with a different agent now who I adore, and she's great, and we have many pots and many fires at the moment. But I definitely think it is one of those things where, yeah, I think that debuting, you think that like even if everything seems to line up, that like things are gonna continue to work out, and things are just gonna be perfect, and you're just gonna stay with your one agent as long as, because I think a lot of times we tell ourselves like, well, if my agent sells my book, what reason do I have to leave? You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I had to learn, like debuting, because that's what I told myself, right? Like my agent sold my, like, what reason do I have to leave? She obviously did a great job. We obviously sold it very quickly. Like, what reason do I have to leave? Right. And it's like I kind of gaslit myself, I think, into staying longer than I should have. And so I do think that one of the things that you should know is that like whether it's what seems like a unicorn story or not, like you really have to give yourself the space to know when things are working or not working with any relationship. Because even with, I mean, I am very, very lucky with my editor. I don't have any horror stories with my editor, but I've even seen people who have horror stories with their editor. So it's like it's one of those things where you have to pay attention to yourself, get with other people, get in community with other people, and figure out what's working. Because like when it comes to those road bumps, like they're gonna happen whether you like them to or not. And sometimes like even when everything seems to be aligned, unfortunately. So I do, and so it's like I said, I'm so glad that you're saying that, right? Because like every story is not a unicorn story, but even when it seems like one, everything is not always aligned.
This is so true, right? Like all of the people I know who have like unicorn stories have also behind the scenes been experiencing like crazy stuff. Things that like they're not going to talk about because it's you know, they got the big deal or they got the great agent.
Even that, right? Like people with the big
Yeah.
deals, and you would think like, oh my gosh, they have these huge deals. They must be so happy. And they are like more miserable than some people who got smaller deals.
Languishing.
It happens. It happens.
I can jump in because I am one of the folks with a unicorn querying experience. I queried March 2022 and then had an offer after about a month. And I'm still with the agent. That agent's wonderful, but that project did die on submission. She's very sweet. And it's like, I don't consider any project dead. I'm like, well, I consider it dead for my own well-being. And so it's one of those things where to reflect what everybody else is saying, you can't predict the process at all. So to kind of take it as it comes, and I think getting agented is one of the, for me at least, was like the most hopeful part of the journey where I was like, oh, I have an agent, my book's gonna go out. And after that point, it's the reality of like, oh, this book might not sell. And then my debut actually got sold on proposal, which was uncommon, but essentially my editor had seen my project pitched online and reached out to my agent about it. And we worked on proposal materials to age it down because it was originally conceived of as an adult project. And so that was honestly kind of a random thing, right? My agent emailed me like, hey, random, but this came out of the blue. And so I think if I had been in a space of feeling very negative and like nothing will work out, I would not have been in the right headspace to like work on this project in such a short time period and turn it around. And so, like Deandra said, roadblocks will happen, and it's a matter of kind of being both hopeful and like realistic, right? It's not the end of the world. This is a professional career, and you have professional relationships with both your agent and editor. And so if they work out, great. And if they don't, you'll move on to the next one. So that would be kind of my insight as I've undergone this process in kind of a weird way.
That's the one thing I've learned is that in this business, the people with staying power are not the most talented, they're not the most clever, they are the people who learn how to pivot. You gotta be ready to pivot.
You got to be a cockroach.
Like truly, like I genuinely think that that's like, I think there's something to be said for just like persistence in this business, like persistence and the ability to pivot. Like a lot of times we think it's like, oh, it's because this person's better than me. It has nothing to do with that. Sometimes like when you're seeing success, it's that person's third, fourth, fifth, sixth book, right? It's their second, third agent. It's, multiple books dead on sub. It's about the persistence, the willingness to pivot, the willingness to keep moving and say, okay, if this is not working, how can I make this work? If like a lot of times it really is just the persistence and the willingness to pivot. Like you said, like if you were not prepared to do that work on such short notice and to make yourself available in different ways, like because sometimes it's not going to come in the way that you think it's going to come. You have to be ready for all options, I think. Which can be hard, but I think that that's kind of what gives us the staying power.
Speaking of pivoting, we're going to pivot into a different question now. So I would love to chat a bit about the market. Did that play a factor in your submission process? Like, was it something you and your agent discussed ahead of time, whether like your book would fit in the market, where it might fit? And is it something querying writers should be thinking about as they are writing or coming up with ideas or querying them? Like, do they need to be thinking 5 steps ahead to the market?
I'm going to answer this in reverse order. I think as a querying writer, you have like a really long runway before a book is going to get published, right? And so the books you're seeing come out now were deals like 3 years ago or something. So even if something is a trend in the bookstore, you can't count on it still being a trend down the line. And I feel like famously a lot of industry professionals talk about how like they don't even know what's going to be trending next, you know? So to some extent, you definitely can't rely on, you know, catching on to some trend. But I do think it's important to at least try and get a good sense of the market. And that's why we look at like comp titles and things, right? We want to make sure that there's some kind of existing audience already for something like your book out there. And so my first book was actually I just decided, you know, I'm just gonna write what I feel like writing, and literally it was like the story in my heart that I wanted to tell, and it was like a dystopian, post-apocalyptic. And immediately when I started actually trying to get into publishing, it was like, well, that's not really selling as much right now. And so when I was writing my next book, I very intentionally tried to do more research and think of genres that were actually on bookshelves in recent years. But at the same time, I feel like don't just write something that's popular or different just because you want to sell. I think that like it's a good strategy, but you also have to remember that like once you have a book out there, that's kind of your brand and that's your career, and you can't just. I mean, you can like pivot like we're talking about and write all types of different stuff, but you might kind of like locked into a certain genre or something. So you don't want to like write stuff that you hate just because it's like a trend and you want to get published either. So I think it's just about educating yourself and keeping like trends in mind, but not totally relying on like, oh, I'm gonna hop on the romantasy bandwagon or something to get published.
I think there's also a really big difference between writing to market and writing something that is marketable. Like, those are two very different things. And I think that you shouldn't be aiming to write to market, but I do think that you should be aiming to write something that is marketable, if that makes sense. And I do think that to an extent, like that's what your agent is going to help you with. Cause like, I mean, like I'm sitting in here with a bunch of people who are writing in genres that are much more profitable than my own. Like I'm debuting in YA contemporary, baby. No, it's not okay. We are not okay. But but YA contemporary is interesting in that it's one of those things where it's like I can't compare myself to like the fantasy girly, you know? Like it's one of those things where it's like more of a marathon and less of a sprint. It's more of a how is this going to place in schools? How is this going to do in the long run? How is it going to do during award season? You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's a very, very different race to run. And so it's not as if I'm sitting here thinking, yes, I'm writing YA contemporary because this is what the market wants, right? Like it was definitely the book that I wanted to write. However, when I went into revisions for my book, we did think about revisions to make it more marketable, if that makes sense. And so, not so much that I wrote to market because I didn't, but I did make it so that my book was more strongly marketable in the end in a way that could more easily be sold. Does that make sense? So, like, I didn't compromise the story in any way. And it was still things that I agreed to and still things that I thought fit the story, but it did make it more marketable that I do think contributed to it selling quickly and doing well in that way. And you know, it's gotten a good response in terms of like critical type responses, right? And so, and I think that like it was because we thought about like the marketability aspect of the story itself, but not so much to is this story fitting what the market wants. So I do think like you can't write to trends because, as CL said, by the time you are going into that, like by the time our books come out, baby, that deal happened 3 years ago. We already on book 2. We not think most of us, some of us are on book 3. We not even thinking about book 1 anymore. Like that thing happened a long time ago. So like, yeah, you definitely don't want to write to a trend, but you do want to make sure that the idea and the execution is marketable in whatever genre you are choosing to write it.
Deandra, sorry, follow-up question. Do you have any like specific things that you changed in your book to make it more marketable?
Oh, absolutely. So like, and I mean, I don't know. It's not really like a spoiler alert because like everybody, like I feel like anybody who reads like the synopsis of my book knows essentially what happens, right? Which is essentially like my main character, he is trying to figure out what happens after his brother is wrongfully arrested. When I first wrote the book, his brother was not arrested. His brother got shot. And his brother was severely injured throughout most of the book. And it definitely changed the tone and the tenor of the book a lot. And by me making it less drastic in that way, and that it could still have the impact of what I was trying to convey without so much of the tragedy, I think that it was able to make it more marketable. And so like it was like, so yeah, if anybody's like, I changed a major plot point because that happened in chapter like in page like 55. So I had to change like the whole rest of the book. But at the same time, I think that it was extremely helpful.
I think to piggyback off that, for our next question too, like, you know, we have a lot of people who are watching are probably going to be writing all different genres. And even here, we have a big mix of different genres and what you guys are writing. So do you feel like genre should, depending on what you want to write, should that inform sort of how you are maybe picking agents who might be more well poised to go to editors of your genre? Or are there different submission strategies that you've encountered that maybe one of your friends who isn't writing the same genre did differently? I guess, yeah, how do you think queering writers should be thinking about that in terms of next steps and how to just start positioning themselves from the very beginning to sell and to attract an agent's attention?
I think when you're doing your research about agents, you really have to look at the breadth of their lists. Like, if you don't have Publishers Marketplace, find a friend who has Publishers Marketplace and search for the agents that you're interested in querying, because the way they're selling will kind of tell you how well positioned they are to sell your book. So my current agent mainly sells horror, dark fantasy, and romantasy. And those are the things I want to write. So, but if you looked at, let's say, like her query manager page, she's open to all kinds of books, but she's selling in a certain segment. So there's a difference between what agents, and she could sell whatever she wants, but she's really good at selling specific things. It's because she has connections in those specific imprints with those specific editors. So it's all about, it's not necessarily even like, oh, which agents represent horror, for example. It's like which agents are actually selling horror and selling it consistently, because you can sell one horror, but can you sell like 15? That's different. I think, who agrees with me on this?
I do.
Same. Fully agree.
Okay, good.
No, you're right. Because I think the one thing that we don't acknowledge enough, unfortunately, is that like, yeah, it's about talent. Yeah, things can line up. But the thing is, this is a business built on connections and relationships. And if you can see that your agent is already selling in a certain bracket, then you know that they already have connections to editors who are going to open their emails because they already know them. And that is a leg up already, right? Like that's a leg up already, right? Knowing that, oh, hey, this agent already has a connection with this editor and that editor and this editor because they've already sold here. So I know that their emails are like, obviously the email is going to get eventually open, but your email might get open faster, you know, and that can help you. Like you do want to think about what are they good at selling, and sometimes it's just what are they good at selling too. Because like I know people, it's not my experience, but I know people who are with, I mean, huge agents, big name agents who had to take projects, like they stayed with their agent, but had to maybe take a separate project out to query outside for that specific project because their agent is not good at selling that genre that they now decided to write. Like maybe that wasn't something they wanted to write at first, but now it's like, oh, well, now I'm writing in this genre and my agent is not well poised with editors or even knowing what editors are good at that, right? Because sometimes it's also about like what they know and their knowledge. And if they've sold certain things, then yeah, I know all the horror editors or I know all the fantasy editors. I know who's good at that. But like maybe now all of a sudden you're writing contemporary and it's like, well, I don't actually really know who's good at taking that. Now it's going to take more time to get the sublist together. Now it's going to maybe not be as good of a matchmaking effort because you don't know those people as well. And so you do want to think about that. You do want to think about how are they already selling? And obviously, if you sign with a newer agent, that might not be possible, but also think about what does their mentorship look like, right? If it's a newer agent, what does their mentorship look like? What connections do the people that they mentored under have? Like, right, what agency are they with? right? And so you do want to just think about it is important to do as much research as possible. That they're aligned not just with what you're writing now. Think about what you want to write in the future too. Because sometimes y'all only thinking about what you write right now. Think about what you might want to write in the future too, because you don't want to get saddled with an agent who is good with what you're writing now, but now, ooh, I know I want to write a horror 3 years down the line and they don't like horror. Don't do that. Don't do that. Make sure that you are thinking long term. Think for your career. Don't just think for this book. Think for your career.
Yeah, to add to that, I wouldn't have my debut if my editor and agent hadn't already had that relationship, because my editor was specifically looking at my agent's clients to see like, oh, who's writing what, right? And also, I guess something I didn't know when I was querying is that your genre does affect kind of your sub list. So adult sci-fi and fantasy has a very narrow list. Like there are only so many houses and editors who take it. And for my first book, because it was kind of speculative genre blendy, we had a much wider sub list because of it. So we were submitting the sci-fi fantasy agents, but editors, but also to like the more general fiction, literary-esque houses. So just know and prepare yourself. Especially if you're a fantasy writer and you're like, why is my sub list so small? There's a reason, because there are only so many editors.
Yeah, that's a great point that sub genre will affect your sub list. Speaking of sub, we all know sometimes sub can last for a second and sometimes it can last for 12 years, it feels like. My sub was like 18 months and then I was like, all right, we're done. Like it's over. And so my question is, do you have tips for the waiting period? Because I know for myself, I'm pretty sure I irrevocably broke my sanity during the waiting period. Like I'm not recovered. Maybe if I had had your tips, I would have done better. So what are your tips for surviving the waiting period?
I feel like I wish I could say that like my tips were something more normal, but honestly, I feel like trying to work through the anxiety of like checking your inbox every day and just wondering is there going to be something today? I feel like that's just a universal experience of every author on sub. I know for my own sanity, I set up like a separate notification alert for if my agents would email me, just so I wouldn't get worried or like get my hopes up the second I saw that, new mail. So I just set up like a separate notification alert, just like a separate color, a separate, even on my phone, so that I wouldn't be able to get my hopes up too high while the process was ongoing. And I think the biggest thing that I did, which really helped me take my mind off things, was just start working on something new and, like fully try to fall in love with that project. Just fully try to pretend that I'm not on sub and that, what, we're just working on the next thing, focusing completely on that. And just like honestly, Jedi mind tricking yourself because it it feels so demoralizing when like months go by without any response and you're like, is this working? Is it not working? Are people reading it? And so I'm sure that's a pretty universal experience. But I think the two like biggest things I did were like constantly stay in contact with my agents and just be like, is there news? Is everything okay? And they would just be like, don't worry. Like no news is good news sometimes. And yeah, I think I leaned hard on my agents, focused on writing something new and just set up and set up alerts so I would not get my hopes up. And those are like the biggest things I did. But I think the smaller ones were also for my mental health, staying off social media, especially Twitter and Instagram for a bit, because I know that this business is just so crazy and everyone has a different timeline. And I knew that people were going to be announcing their deals left, right, and center. And I'm just like, I don't know if I'm in the right headspace to see that, especially when I currently view myself as the worst writer of all time. So I'm just gonna, take a step back, just wait it out, and then when I'm ready, I'll come back on. So I think staying off social media was like a big thing for me because it's like I'm happy for you, but I hate myself. And so there's that. Yeah, I hope that's not, I hope that's more of a universal experience than just me, but that's all I got.
What a vibe. Truly. Like, I wish I'd set up email alerts. I think it would have saved my brain. Now, having gone on sub 4 times in like a 2-year period, I really do not enjoy being on submission. Nobody enjoys being on submission. There's like a weird thing that happens where you're like so excited to go on submission, and then you're on submission, you're like, I hate this. Why is this so bad? Um, I also would like to echo, if you can get yourself Jedi mind tricked into believing that you are actually not on submission in some way, shape, or form. I am not a person who likes to sit around, unfortunately for me and everybody around me. So I'm always working on something, which is like bad for my mental health, like overall, but when on submission, it's the least bad thing for my mental health. So always writing, whether or not it's helpful, it's distracting.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's sort of just whatever you can do to get through each day, I feel like, and they might look different from day to day, but and I think the same thing applies with querying too. I mean, you're still waiting for other people, you're still getting rejections, you're still getting your hopes up, and then something could happen. I think sort of related, the next question that we wanted to go through is, how have your goalposts changed over the years? Because, you know, we hear that with a lot with writers, and you know, when you're querying, getting an agent is the most important thing in the world. And then that feeling of success is very short-lived, unfortunately. As soon as you go on sub, your goalpost immediately changes. And I think for me, at least, you know, I immediately felt like, oh, getting an agent didn't matter because now I need to sell my book. And that sucks. Like, you know, I think in terms of like having longevity, like how do you guys recommend sort of dealing with those shifting goalposts? What would you encourage writers, I think, to, maybe this is a bit of a leading question, but how would you encourage writers to kind of, you know, make sure that they're still honoring every success, whether that's small or big, when you're going through this really long process? Like Deandra said, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
First thing is comparison is the thief of joy. And also remember to keep in context who and what you're comparing yourself to, I think, because it's like I said, like I think that sometimes like we can get in the habit of, so like when you talk about goalposts, right? Like the first goalpost is in some ways the easiest one because it's the clearest one, because you know, okay, I need to get an agent. That's a very, very clear goalpost, right? But then even when it comes time for you to go on sub and it's time for you to make this sale, everybody's goalpost is different. Some people are like, well, I need to sell to a big five, or I need to get this number on my deal, or I need to, you know what I mean? And so all of those goalposts are different. And sometimes you got to let those things go, because there are people with smaller deals who have way more pub support, or at a smaller publisher that have way more pub support than someone who is at a big five, right? So like sometimes you need to make sure that you're adjusting kind of what expectations are, and like not tricking yourself into thinking that there is one way for this to look, or one right way for this to look, or else you're not going to be happy. Because like I know people who are with big fives that are miserable, and I know people that are with smaller pubs that are having a wonderful time. I know people who got bigger deals than me who did not get the same pub support that I got, you know? And so it's one of those things where you really have to think about like keeping things in perspective and not tricking yourself into almost screwing yourself into saying like, well, it has to be this, right? Because like I know, like even when we were getting sub offers, like when I was on sub and I got my offers, I almost picked Penguin Random House just because they were Penguin. I did. I will admit it to y'all. I got an offer from Penguin. I said, baby, that is Penguin. I had Penguin books growing up. I want a Penguin on my book. I almost picked just on that. That would have been a terrible decision because my editor is amazing, right? My editor is amazing. And I know that my editor cares about the length of my career and not just this book, and wants to stick with me for all of my ideas. And had I signed with someone else, I would have had that. You know what I mean? So like you want to think about like where you're sticking those goalposts, and are they in, and I don't necessarily say like in a realistic place, but in a place that makes sense for you, right? Because like some people too, once you sell, it's like, oh, well, I want to get 30,000 ads on Goodreads, or I want to be a New York Times bestseller. But also think about What genre are you writing? We have to remember a lot of these things are curated. A lot of these things are set up a certain way. Certain genres get more attention than other genres, and that doesn't mean that you are failing in any way, right? It doesn't mean that you're failing in any way. It means that maybe you're comparing yourself to, maybe it's you're an apple and they're an orange, right? And you don't really need to be, or even worse, maybe you are fruit and they are vegetables. Like, you need to stop comparing. Like, you need to stop comparing, because you guys are not running the same race, right? Like, we talked about this a little bit before. Like, I talked to this where someone was like, sometimes you can even look and see some people are being placed more for a commercial track, and some people are being placed more for a, we want to place this in schools, we want to place this in libraries, we're worried about award season track. And that's going to look different, and they're going to approach your marketing different. They're worried about different metrics, they're worried about different goals. So definitely don't compare yourself. Do not compare yourself to a single other person, right? Don't compare yourself to a single other person, because everybody's race looks so different than yours. And just think about where your book fits. What do you want for your book? Because I think that even sometimes I pulled myself into having goalposts that were not the best goalposts. And I realized that, like, sometimes the smaller things are the better things, right? Having an author event and having someone come up to you and tell you how much your book and your characters mean to them, that is a meaningful goalpost. And that is a goalpost that you can reach. And it is a goalpost that genuinely, even for all the big stuff, those are the little ones that are really going to make a difference to you. So I think, definitely just don't compare yourself. Think about where your book fits in its space and its time, and give yourself time too. Don't burn out in the first week or two, like, oh my God, I didn't hit a bestseller list, or I didn't do this, or I didn't get a star review, or I didn't get this. Don't drive yourself crazy. Give yourself time, right? Like, the best marketing for your first book is your second book. Give yourself time. Give yourself time to get there too. So I think definitely just be prepared to move goalposts, be prepared to shrink them a little bit. Maybe.
Deandra is my new mom. Deandra, can you come over and be my parent me? Those are all like curled up in my chair like a shrimp, like, oh my God. Did I just get parented on live YouTube? YouTube Live?
So funny. But I feel like it's the things that, like, we learn and, like, that we need, and, like, and it's like I said, find community, but also, like Shalini said, like, sometimes community is too much. Take a break, right? Like, y'all are gonna be trying to join those debut chats. Stay away from them foreign rights deal sections. Okay, stay away from that sub rights. Stay away from the pub wins. Stay away, right? Stay away. Don't look. You don't have to listen. You can be happy for people, but you don't got to cheer for everybody all the time. Sometimes you can take a break for your mental health and be okay. Like, because sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it hurts to see other people winning and you're not winning, or you're not getting those same things. Take a break. It's okay to take a step back. It does not make you a hater. It does not make you are human. Take a break. Step away from the channels where everybody is celebrating everything that's happening to them. If you know that you're not getting those things, you are being a masochist. Okay, step away. Step away from. Sometimes all information is not relevant information. Just step away.
That was all really great and very helpful, and I'm just gonna like lock it away for the future. But for those of you, okay, that was silly. You've all been on sub, obviously. But what were things that your agents did while you were on sub that really made you be like, oh, yes, that was amazing? Like, what would you recommend querying writers look for in agents during the sub process that worked well? I don't know if that made sense, so I hope you got it.
I think my biggest thing is communication. I am such an anxious person. I honestly, like, I'm sure we all know that sometimes publishers are not the greatest with the deadlines that they even give you. So sometimes, like, an agent or an editor will be like, yeah, I'm gonna have this over to you by like Monday, and then Monday comes and goes, and you're like, where is it? Like realistically, this is not a big deal, but like, where is the thing? And so the same thing I feel like is really big for me on sub, where I'm like, I know things are happening behind the scenes, but is there a way I can sort of get a little, just like a little summary of what's going on? Because sometimes if months go by without any communication, I get really worried. And I think an agent that's ready to communicate and be like, hey, we sent it out to these people. These people have said no. It's still with these people. Like, I feel like that's so important. And I thought that I guess before I, really started engaging with people in the book community, I somehow thought that that would be a given, and I'm really discovering that it's not, and that months can go by without, authors hearing anything from their agents, anything from their editors, and it sounds terrifying. It sounds just like the worst state of anxiety to be in. So if I was, and I feel like authors tend to be just like a decent bit anxious. I feel like we're all reasonably anxious people in some ways. And so I think that just communication from agents is just the number one big thing that I would beg inquiring writers to look for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I was looking at my agent, I had one other offer. And I think a key question that helped me get insight into how my particular agent operated is asking those clients that you talk to. So once you get an offer, typically an agent will set you up with some of their current clients just to talk with them. And if you're comfortable doing a phone call or video chat, just because I think most people feel a little bit more okay being transparent or honest versus writing it down via email. And so a question I asked, like, what was like a moment of like high conflict during your sub process or like a really disappointing hard part, and how did your agent kind of lead you through that? And I think that was a very like insightful answer. And both the agents I considered had their clients were really great with those answers, and it gave me a lot of insight. But it's those moments where kind of things are not good that I think say something about how this person will operate and help you through sub. And also, I think an agent will typically always say like, yeah, I'm in it for your career, but sometimes that's not the case. And so talking with clients and specifically asking like, what happens when you didn't sell? Like what was that like? Did you see a change in how responsive and communicative your agent was? And the answer should be ideally no. But that's not always the case. And so those are hard things. And I will say, going back to Taylor's point at the very beginning, sometimes you can do your due diligence and still not be a great fit with your agent. And, it's unfortunate, but it happens. So, to not beat yourself up too much if that does happen to you.
I do actually want to say a little bit more about that. Things can change, and your relationship with your agent can change. And ideally, even if your book doesn't sell, your agent still retains like interest in your career. Ideally, that's what would happen. But sometimes that's not true. And sometimes like you think that you're a really good fit, as Heen said, and then it becomes apparent that like your work is moving in a different direction than the things they're interested in. That's fine. And I wish when I spoke to my second agent first, right before I signed with her, I was really excited because I loved her client list and she seemed so positive. But I wish I had asked that question about, what happens if we disagree? Because we did have a disagreement, and it was one of the things that stayed with me as our relationship changed. I wouldn't say deteriorated, just like it became different. Because we had a conflict point about how to deal with a rejection that seemed like an R&R. For people who are not familiar, editors can also give you an R&R. And oftentimes they do. My child is here. So, it's important to think about not just like the good and cool stuff that can happen on submission. It's important to think too about, well, what if you disagree with your agent's strategy? Like, what if you feel like they're not being sharky enough? What if you feel like they're being too sharky? These things make a huge difference. I'm going to stop talking now.
And also an agent who's like willing to, like, I think like you said, kind of consider your mental health and protect you too. I will say it's like I said, things with, even though I'm not with the agent that sold my book, because of just like other factors, like as a person and as someone who like protected my interests, protected my mental health, like she was stellar at that. Like she protected me from rejections that were ableist. Because sometimes that will happen, right? Like I know some people who just say like their agent will just forward them a rejection and they just got to get it straight. Like sometimes I need you to screen that for me. Sometimes I need you to screen that for me and protect my mental health. And so like I mean, and sometimes like you guys were saying, communication, someone who's willing to ask you like, hey, how would you like to get notification of rejection? How often would you like to be updated on these things? Right? Like, do you want it as soon as it comes in, or do you maybe want me to update an Airtable every week or update your Google Doc every week? Like, definitely learn about those strategies and find someone who's going to be willing to collaborate with you in terms of that communication and figure out how to best protect yourself, because it's a hard process. And you want someone who is going to be willing to protect you. Like everyone said, it's not just about the good stuff. It is about that hard stuff too, because hard stuff is going to happen and you want to know how they're going to handle that and protect you in those moments.
Yeah, thank you all. I think these questions are, Karis and I definitely wanted to touch on them because I think when I was saying this before, but when you're in the querying stage, it feels like going on sub and selling a book feels so distant and like there's nothing, it feels like such a separate process. And it's hard to see the sort of like linearity with it. And so I think we wanted to, in terms of what sort of things can people look for in agents, but also I want to open it up to, is there anything else that you wish that you had known at the querying stage that informed when you sold your book or when you went on submission, something that that querying writers can do ahead of time, again, to just like poise themselves for the best experience?
Yeah, I think a lot of things, but the biggest thing for me was when I was querying and before that even, I pictured it kind of as this upward trajectory of like, okay, so first I got to write a really good book so I can get a really good agent and then get a good book deal and then the book will do well. Thinking of it as this like progression potentially, but I feel like that really starts to break down, especially at like the submission and publishing phase, especially as you get less about like people and individuals and more about like corporations and factors you can't control so much. Like we were talking about earlier, for example, you can get like a really good agent and a book deal and stuff, but some genres, you're not set up the same as other genres, and also marginalized authors aren't set up the same as, other types of authors. And there's so many things that can happen, especially with like a whole company, like people can get fired or quit, or there can be tariffs and book bans, like the world can do stuff to you. And so like, even if, you think you're gonna be like just going uphill this whole time, well, not, that's a bad metaphor because uphill's hard. Downhill comfortably. It's you have to kind of prepare yourself for like, this is really grim, I'm sorry, but like you can do everything right and you can be awesome and you can still have some weird, crazy shit happen to you and affect your book. So I think just remember like there's so much randomness and chance in the industry as well, which is like terrifying, but it's also kind of freeing, right? It's like you can't fully control things like how your book does or like having a big hit of a book. So just remind yourself that, of course, focus on writing a good book and stuff, but it does get crazy out there. I wish I had known that so I could mentally prepare.
I think too, we talk a lot about picking the right agent and clearing and everything like that. But like if when the time comes, because obviously the agent is the first hurdle, but essentially what we are aiming to do is sell a book and have someone buy the book. If when the time comes you have a choice, think past dollar signs and prestige when you're making a choice for your publisher. Like genuinely ask other people if you can get in contact with other people who have that editor. Try, right? If you can get as much information as you can, do that, right? And like CL says, you can also do everything right and bad things can still happen. Your editor can quit, your editor can leave, all kinds of, they can downsize and everyone can get fired. Your entire imprint could get shuttered. I've seen all of those things happen to people. But at the same time, if you can do your due diligence to the best of your ability to think past just dollar signs, right? When you are making decisions, if you have the chance to make a decision, sometimes you only have one offer, right? But even then, and I know it's gonna sound crazy, and I know it may sound rich coming from me because, oh, well, you already have a deal, you can say that. But the same way we say no agent is better than a bad agent, I'm just saying no deal might be better than a bad one, right? And a bad one may look different. A bad one may not always be bad money. It may be an editor who's not a good fit. It may be an editor who's not necessarily concerned about your long-term career. It may be a publisher who doesn't do right by you if you're marginalized. It may be a whole list of things. But like, also know if you get into that deal and you don't like that editor and you do get to that place, you can say no. You don't have to keep signing with them. Like, because sometimes people feel like they're stuck and they're like, well, I should sell them my option because I'm already, no, no, choose yourself first. Like, genuinely, it's hard, and it's so hard to walk away once we already have the thing, right? It's so hard to say no or to walk away once we have the thing, but you want to make sure that you are not making this miserable for yourself. And also, I think like my girl, please. Sorry, my child is in here. But also, the one thing, and this is the best advice I've ever gotten, this is just general advice. When things are hard, don't make decisions on a bad day. Don't make decisions on a hard day. If something is bad, don't say I'm gonna quit today, right? Don't even say I'm gonna stay with it on a good day. On a day when nothing is happening, on a day when everything is neutral, on a day when you were just coasting, think about the trajectory of things, and then you decide, is this worth me staying in? So not when things are good, not when things are bad, when you're just coasting along, that's the time to make decisions about whether or not you stick with it or whether or not you don't. Because I know it's easy to quit when it's hard, and it's easy to say I'm gonna stick with it when it's good, right? But take those times when you're neutral to make those decisions, and don't force yourself into anywhere where you feel like you don't fit.
I think it's really important to consider what your goals are. I personally only want to work with editors who are similarly marginalized. I really feel very strongly it's good for my story, it's good for their visibility, it's good for my visibility, it's good for the corporations that they work inside to see that there's a need, not just a want, but like a real need. But also it's little things like I really want to work with an autistic narrator for my audiobook. I really want to make sure that my copy editor is neurodivergent, because people who are neurodivergent talk differently than people who are not, just little things. But it's good, I think, in addition to what Deandra is saying, to like sit down and really think about what your goals are as an author, not just your writing goals, but like your career goals, because those will inform not just the agent you sign with, but eventually the editor you end up selling your book to, and the trajectory of your career as a whole.
I'll add something a little bit different, but maybe a strategy for querying writers, because I think there's a lot of anxiety over editing and revising to get that agent. But you're revising so many different points in time, like before you get the agent, after you get the agent, after you get the editor, before you get the editor, after you get the editor. So, do what you feel like you need to do to kind of get your foot in the door. But ultimately, like you could cut something when you were querying that you could add back in later if it gets acquired by an editor because they asked for you to flesh something out, right? So querying, I think there's a little bit more flexibility there. And like if you're like, this is like, I need this in the book, keep it. But if something you're like about, like, don't feel bad cutting it, and you can always return to it later. So I think really trusting that the book that ends up kind of coming to the world will be the right one, and trusting your instinct throughout that. And I think earlier about marketability and stuff, like you're gonna look at that thing so many times. I just finished Past Pages, and that was my 7th full read of the book. So don't write something that you're not, you're gonna look at it a lot. So please like what you're looking at. Because if you don't, it's gonna be kind of torturous.
All right. One question that I have is, do y'all have any advice for querying or on-sub authors who are just like languishing in the waiting period, which is similar to the tips and tricks for surviving, but like, yeah.
I know a lot of people last time this came up said write the next thing, but I'm one of those people who can't write the next thing. So my advice, I'll try something different for that. I think taking care of yourself is really important. And being kind to yourself, and also just not thinking of anything as like a waste of time. Because first of all, you have a whole life outside of the book stuff, right? You're not wasting your life, wasting your time. Anything you write, even if it doesn't, get an agent, at the very worst, it's practice, it's experience, and you've learned something. But also a lot of times, even if you think, oh, this died in the pouring, turned to this dead, it was, whatever. Sometimes it's not. I know a lot of people who have gone back once they've gotten an agent or editor and revised old books, or things can change in the world, or like the industry, the trends, whatever, and you can go back with more experience and like rewrite your old book and whatever. So just really try not to think of it as like wasted time, and as just like learning, and also like future potential opportunities.
I have given endless advice, so instead I give encouragement. I channel my inner Kris Jenner, and I'm telling you all, you're doing amazing, sweetie. You're doing amazing.
Thank you. I think that's a beautiful place to finish our planned questions. If everyone is good on time, feel free to drop off if you need to. But we did have some questions from Discord, from our Roundtable Mentor Discord, that I just wanted to touch on. So I think one question that someone asked was, if you had multiple offers from agents or publishers, what was the deciding factor besides the size of the deal? I know, Deandra, you touched on this a little bit, but what are things that people should be prioritizing that might not seem immediate?
I think it's always the integrity of your work and your story. I had multiple agent offers the second and third time. And for me, it always came down to like, does this person get it? What I'm trying to say? We say this a lot, but it really is important. And I think there's a good reason it's repeated so often. If it doesn't matter how flashy this agent is, if they don't understand your story and they're asking you to change fundamental things about it, then they're not the agent for you. And if they don't, corollary point to this, if they don't have a plan, if they're just like, I like your book, that's not a plan, and truly, when you sign with an agent, you're signing with, for lack of a better word, an editor. And so they have to have some kind of concrete plan. And if they're not interested in revising your book at all, like, why? You know what I mean? Like, don't go with a person who's not willing to go toe to toe on the mat with your words, because that's what this business is about. And you can think of it as preparatory when you're querying, but you're going to be editing that book, as Heen said, a million times. You're going to read it like so many times. You're going to be nauseous by the time you turn it in when you're done. So yeah, find somebody who really gets you.
I think since Taylor specifically talked about with agents, I guess I can touch on like in terms of like a deal, like don't choose just based off of money. I know people who chose based off of money and they realize that the editor is not a great fit after the fact, right? And so you definitely want to think about, I'm sorry, there's a child behind me. I think you want to think about how are they thinking about your career in the long term? What does their editorial vision look like? Give them other ideas, especially if you're trying to choose between editors. Give them other ideas. Make sure that they like other stuff that you have coming down the pipeline, right? If you know that maybe you want to write other stuff, figure out if they might want to pivot with you to other genres. Like think about long term, I think. with an editor. I think that would be my advice, right? Because ideally, right, and people jump around with editors and people jump around with publishers, but ideally you do want to try to stick with one, right? Because it's nice, right? Like if you have one, it's nice to stick with one. You might diversify, but it is nice to try to stick with one. So think about how you're going to work with them long term if they understand not just this book, but other ideas that you have long term.
I'm gonna add that. Oh, sorry, Karis, didn't mean to cut you off. Just a very quick addition to what Deandra and Taylor have said. But a big one for me is also making sure that they understand the struggles that you as an author, specifically like marginalized authors, that they understand the struggles that you might face in this industry compared to, perhaps less, more less marginalized authors, or just like more neurotypical people and people who are just generally favored by the industry. I don't know if a better way to phrase it, but I think it's so important that an agent and any editor that you signed with understands that most often, very often, that marginalized authors face more roadblocks on this journey, and they're poised to not just understand those battles, but to look them dead on and be like, I know how to handle this. I've handled this before, or I have the resources to help me handle this. And I can draw on, like the power of my agency or the power of the publishing company to help you navigate this. And I think that's really, really important for marginalized authors, because I feel like this is an industry that especially likes to profit off the work of marginalized authors while not necessarily being fair to them. And so when you're signing with an agent and an editor, I would tell any querying writer, like, please look at whether these people are going to go to bat for you when necessary, because it probably will be necessary, one, and you don't want to ever feel like you're in your own corner, and that even your agent and editor don't really get what you are going through in this moment. And that's just like a very lonely feeling. And I definitely know people who've experienced that. And yeah, it's not where you want to be after all the hard work that authors put into querying and just making it all the way here. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Thank you for adding that. For those of you who've either had your books come out or are already like in the weeds of self-promotion, do you have ideas in hindsight of like what worked well, of like your self-promotion, or what was maybe too much effort or money or time for the payoff that you actually got and that like you would skip next time?
It's too early for me to tell what like worked, and probably for many of us as well. But one thing I want to say about like the topic in general is that a lot of publishers, like another incorrect assumption I had is like, oh, they're the experts, they know what to do. They're good at marketing books, and no one knows what they're doing. Like, especially because like a lot of platforms have changed, and like, technology, like what might have worked as like an Instagram ad no longer works, or people relied on Twitter, and now Twitter's fuck that. But things change a lot, and a lot of times marketing departments are still trying to figure stuff out too. And you never can really know fully, even if they promise you stuff on an offer call that they're going to do for you. It's not actually really a guarantee or promise. So for me, I've just kind of decided to do whatever I can, because on the author end, it's really, there's not much you can do to move the needle. Of course, you can like go viral or have a following already or something, but it's a lot of stuff that's like you can't rely on it. So I've just used like whenever I have free time, I've just done what I can and what makes sense for me and what I can handle. I've been driving around literally like to every bookstore in my area and doing all these like little things, and it's not, I don't think it's worth it, frankly. Like realistically speaking, like is me driving 2 hours to talk to one person gonna be 2 hours salary worth of money for me? No, but like I think you just always should keep trying if you're able to, and just see, because again, one person could be that person who makes you go viral if they do a post about you. Like, you just never know. So I don't know, that's kind of like counterintuitive advice. I feel like it's like you can't guarantee it, but you never know. So I don't know, it really just like keep your mental health in mind, and don't put too much pressure on yourself, because you shouldn't be expected to carry the weight on your own anyway. So
I want to piggyback off of that. Actually, one of my favorite things to do is talk. And because of that, anytime anyone's like, hey, do you want to come on a podcast? Hey, do you want to like help host this panel. Hey, do you want to be in conversation with me when my book launches? I always say yes. I like to talk. And some people don't like to talk. And so this advice may or may not apply to you. But I do think, obviously, my book hasn't released yet. And I agree. I don't think this will significantly move the needle. But for me personally, engaging with readers has been the most rewarding part of this. Not the money, not the shiny cover stuff, not going viral on TikTok. It's literally just like being in a room with readers is so moving and wonderful. And when they're like, can we have your signature on this arc? I'm like, oh my, like that makes a difference. Similarly, getting to know the buyers at local bookstores, whether that's Barnes and Noble or your local indie, it's like amazing. Because reading and writing really isn't about like going viral on the internet. Reading and writing is about making a difference in people's lives through your stories. And so for me, that looks like connecting with my community in whatever way I can. So I would find like the one thing that really means something to you that you enjoy doing and lean into it. That is not necessarily social media, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love these tips. I think the next question that we had too was if you had, it's a bit of a pivot, but if you had multiple books rejected by agents or editors, what do you think made the difference between the books that did get published or offered on, and the one that did?
I am muted. Nothing. When you get to a place where you have an agent who is submitting your book to editors, it is luck and timing, which is also luck. Okay. So like if your book dies on sub, it doesn't mean it's a bad book. It just means it wasn't that book's time. That's it. That is my full professional opinion. Zero. No difference. Nobody else is going to follow that up.
I can follow just briefly in that I agree with that 100%. And also, some things just happen the way they happen. And it, like Taylor said, it's luck, but also maybe it's the best for you. So my first book that died in sub was very much a book I wrote during the process of grieving my mother. And so it's so intimately tied with those events that I feel like I'd be in a very different emotional place if I was debuting with that book, right? Versus the book, like there's spoiler, because their mother gets murdered, they're still grieving their mother in this one. It's just a different book though, right? And so, I think sometimes just accepting that some things kind of fall the way they do, and it might be better for you that way too.
That thank you both for that answer, because as someone who's had a book die on sub, I'm always like, what did I do wrong? So apparently nothing. And I also think in your point that like sometimes the book is not the right one for the right moment. Like that's a really excellent point. And I think this might be our final question. So that's exciting or not, depending on how much fun you're having. So whether your debut book has already come out or you're still anticipating it, how do you feel about sales? What advice would you give to authors who are beginning to focus on the steps after getting agented, who are nervous that their debut work may or may not meet sales expectations before they have the chance to see how it unfolds?
Honestly, I would like.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
No, that was it. That was my.
I guess so. Mine came out on April 1st, and so this is a very recent. This is very recent for me. And yeah, I think it's so impossible not to be worried about sales, not to be worried about whether the success of especially a debut is going to affect your entire career. And obviously, I don't see myself as someone who can move the needle on the power of based on the power of my 1.9K Instagram followers. So I think as authors we want to feel like we have some semblance of control over it. We want to feel like maybe there's something we can do to change how many books sell. And so something I did that I cannot tell whether or not it changed anything, but it made me feel like I was doing something. So I reached out to I emailed almost every single indie bookseller in the States, in Canada, and I was like, do you want to run like a release campaign with me where I will literally send you like character like, art prints, and if anyone wants to buy my book in store, like that is there for them for free, so maybe that would incentivize sales. Now, is that something that is working? I do not know, but what I will say is that it's allowed me to really connect with some incredible booksellers, you know, across the States, across Canada, even across the UK. And so that's just sort of been just a surprise bonus of that. I've just gotten to meet so many lovely people, and they've gotten to read my book, which perhaps wouldn't have happened if I hadn't reached out to them. And so I guess being concerned about like the worry, I think, is always going to be there. But I think using that worry as a way to connect with readers, as a way to connect with booksellers and other people, that is something that I have found that just sort of A, mitigates the worry, and B, reminds me of what the most important thing here is, which is community and a love of books and just people getting to enjoy stories. Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that nothing I can do really will impact sales, and honestly, the research kind of bears that out. So I agree with Shalini. I think it's really like the things you can control. If you enjoy doing those things, then you should do them. If you enjoy posting on social media and that alleviates some kind of deep anxiety about your sales, you should do that. However, on the flip side of that, nothing you haven't done will impact your sales either. Do you see what I'm saying, right? Like nothing you do and nothing you don't do will change this. What actually seems to change it is publisher investment. And this comes back to having a good agent who will advocate for you if they see like your marketing team isn't spending enough time on your book for whatever reason. Or like they notice that your book isn't listed properly in Barnes and Noble with like their little BISAC or whatever it's called, their like little categorization system that puts your book in certain categories. That's when an agent really comes in handy, stuff like that. So I think the things that can alleviate your worries, probably it's just going to have to come from a place of understanding. At least for me, I need to like understand the problem first. And knowing I can do very little about it kind of helps in a weird way. As CL said earlier, like there's not much I can do, but that like I know that. So, you know, what can you do? But that's freeing.
Yeah. You are not responsible for your sales, especially if you're marginalized. Stop that. Stop that. And just to bring it all back around, because I also feel like I've been a little bit like negative. But I mean, so I was in a mentorship program and I was out on social media, and then I was like throughout this whole process, the one consistent thing for me that has been really amazing has just been community. And again, like with my book, it remains that. And I've had similar experiences to what everyone was talking about, where like meeting booksellers, having people come my DMs and just express liking the book, all these random encounters and things. And like at the end of the day, again, like all respect to people who just want to, you know, make some money and all that. But like the community and these interactions, like it really makes you remember why we do this. And a lot of writing is about like connecting with people, right? So try and foster that community and stick together and all of that. Because I have friends who have decided that publishing is no longer for them, but they're still my friends, you know, and that's super valuable. And I know one day I'll stop writing books too, but like this is the kind of stuff that you keep, and it's really important to foster and cherish. And so basically, love you guys. How do you do heart hands like the young people style? Is this it? Gen Z heart hands? There you go.
I am too old for that. Thank you.
All right, well, I think that's it. If anyone has any last minute things, this is going to be live and recorded on YouTube. So I don't think we got any live questions, but we did have some viewers. So thank you for watching, and we're going to have more events throughout the year. So stay tuned. And yeah, round of applause for our great panelists. Thank you guys. Good luck with your books. I hope everyone goes and orders all of your books now. And yeah, we'll end it here.